Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the Echols Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Terrence Echols. Long time no see. Uh, took a short break from doing the podcast for a while, but we're back now with the new episode with a good friend of mine, a good coworker of mine. His name is Karna Venkatraj. Karna originally was supposed to come on and talk hoops. He has his own podcast called Hoops Royalty, where they talk a lot about the Memphis Grizzlies and NBA basketball in general. So I highly suggest you should go check that out. But our conversation ended up taking a turn, and we didn't talk about basketball the whole time. But in my opinion, it was a great conversation. We covered a lot of really interesting topics, and yeah, it's out now on all platforms. So, before you check it out, please make sure to leave a like on the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and enjoy the podcast. This is me and Karna Venkatraj. House? Do you want to talk about house shopping, or do you not want to discuss it? Or
We can go no house shopping. Right
no
now.
house shopping?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very stressful, and I fear I might be talking about it for a longer. No,
Really?
we can talk. We can hit on it for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. What's it like looking for a house then? At what are you, 26?
Yeah. 26. It's a little nerve wracking. I think with my finance background, which we'll get into,
Mm-hmm.
I get in like an asset mindset where I'm like, I don't really care about how I'm living. I just care about whether it will retain value.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's the wrong mindset when you're trying to find like a house for the next 5 years. It's got to be a mix, right? You got to be like, oh, I want to find something that's going to retain value, but also something that I think I can make into a home.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm kind of between those two things, and I think like in the next couple of days I'll start making offers on houses, so that's pretty exciting. Yeah,
dude, that's awesome. Like
yeah.
at 26 years old, like I feel like, especially my dad's in real estate.
Yeah.
That's why I asked. That's why I'm so interested by it. Like with the way the market looks and just the way it's looking for our generation, especially, it's like scarier and scarier for us to gain assets.
And this is my thought process on that, right? Is there are very few markets in the country right now where it's possible to buy a house for someone earning around where we might be earning in our early to mid 20s.
Yeah.
Right. So I think Cleveland is a market like that. Memphis, which we'll get into, is a market like that. Cleveland's such an interesting story because it during the kind of 40s, 50s, 60s, and once you look at the housing inventory when you get to that stage, is what you'll see is that a lot of the houses were built in that era.
Right.
So what that tells you is like when Cleveland was economically in a boom, they were building houses like crazy, trying to build for a generation of people that would move to Cleveland in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And they did for a little while, but with how the economy has changed in Cleveland, that people have been moving to Chicago and other urban areas away from Cleveland. So there's all this housing inventory in places like South Euclid, Shaker Heights, even on the west side, that is like depressed in value and will always be low in value in terms of their national average for a 3-bedroom house. So Cleveland's a great place to buy. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what does it look like from just a structural standpoint? Is it going to take a lot of, love and TLC and all that stuff just to live in it? Or
probably for someone else. I could kind of live anywhere that had Wi-Fi and air conditioning.
Okay.
I think there will be some tender loving care needed for decorating and for making it a home like we talked about. But one of my criteria coming in, and this is really interesting. So I interviewed kind of my real estate agents like I would interview for a position that I was hiring for.
Right.
Where I would be like, these are my criteria. What are the things that you think you can do for me? And for me, I was like, no fixer upper, because I'm not handy enough to fix like plumbing and things like that. So it needed to be minimal to tender loving care in terms of investment in like big ticket items, which is what my real estate agent calls it.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot's going on with you. I know you've made a ton of moves in your career so far, just being out of college, however long you've been out, 4 years or so?
Almost 5 years now.
Almost 5 years out of college.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of moves. You've changed careers a few times. I just wanted to just pick your brain on that a little bit. Like, let's just go back a little bit to, I know you mentioned how Texas helped shape how you and your brothers sort of view things in the world. So talk a little bit about that.
That's something I've thought about a lot. One, I think all of our hometowns do an understated job of shaping how we think about things, just because it does take a village to raise, a kid, and your perspectives are impacted by the people around you and the environment around you. And once we get into teaching, I think we can talk more about that. But for my, growing up in a small town like College Station, you kind of get this idealistic American dream, white picket fence kind of upbringing. And I think for us, it really made us family and community oriented because we were so immersed in that. And I think it really, really made us value things like even smaller things like space, which was a culture shock when I moved to New York City, because I had so much space in Texas, so much space to move around, a yard, a park, things that I would want, when I have a kid or when I buy a house, things that I want. And it really defined those things in my head. For what I want out of my future life. And I know for my brothers, it does the same thing, but it's a challenge in some ways too, because what we were talking about earlier is how the housing markets change, right? There isn't you can't just go build a house in Texas now for, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now it's millions of dollars. Yeah. So while it did us so much good, right? It gave us so many community and family values growing up in a town like that. It also kind of, because we were so privileged, for lack of a better term, it also messed up how we might navigate currently buying a house or buying property or community that we might live in. Rather than, sitting in a community and looking to improve it, we expect our community to be a certain way right when we move in. So that's something I kind of had to unlearn as I became a teacher, and I even as I moved to Cleveland, and something that I'm still, navigating and challenge with today.
Yeah, I think changing expectations, I was just talking about this the other day, is like, that's one of the hardest things you have to do in life sometimes, is just changing your expectations, just because you get so used to the way things are. And changing expectations can turn to a lot of just like disappointments, as well as even more angrier emotions, just like such as like revenge or envy or whatever you want to call it. I think, well, let's continue to stay back in your professional career, and talk a little bit about what made you want to stay closer to home, and attend such a university like the University of Texas. I know that's a prominent school down there, but there are a few really prominent schools in that area. What made you decide UT?
Yeah, I think for me, there was really only a decision between Texas A&M and the University of Texas. Texas A&M is a town that I like. College Station is where Texas A&M is where I grew up. It's where my dad taught. UT was appealing for a couple of reasons. So my middle brother went to UT, and we had a house in Austin around, maybe 45 to an hour outside of Austin. And so I grew up, spending a lot of summer days in Austin, just spending a lot of like day trips in Austin. Loved it. Loved the culture that it had. Loved just being on the drag, or it's called Guadalupe, but like I loved the environment of the University of Texas. And on top of that, I got into an honors program, Plan 2 honors, which is like just a liberal arts honors program. And at that point, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And that was like a feeder program for like pretty top-notch law schools. And those two things kind of solidified. I loved Austin, loved the honors program, and it had everything that I wanted, like good sports team. Not at the time, but the potential for good sports teams.
Was this the Ellinger era?
So I was spread across. I caught the first half of the Ellinger era.
Okay.
I was the Tyrone Swoops era too.
Okay.
And that was not a great time. And Shane Buechele too. But all that's to say, loved Austin. And something that's really underrated for some of your younger audience. I actually mentor a kid who goes to the Hawkins School right now, and he's looking at schools and colleges. One thing I recommend for a lot of younger kids is like when you're looking at college, don't just look at the college in a vacuum. Austin provided me just as much opportunities as the University of Texas did. My first job was a startup, like cold calling, marketing for a startup.
Yeah.
Right. My second job was like a small private equity firm in Austin that was focused on like trucking companies. So Austin provided this incredible wealth of opportunity to me that I think was underrated and understated, just as much as UT Austin did, and that's only growing. So when you're evaluating things like college and even like your career, right?
Mm-hmm.
One thing that was important to me when I moved to Cleveland was like, is there an opportunity for community impact, which is something you're familiar with? Like,
Huge.
is there community partners that I could work with? Now I'm involved with True to You and some other like community partners.
Same
I
here.
wanted that kind of. Oh yeah, you're True to You mentor too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's also something I wanted to. So just don't get caught up in the job or a school. My advice to younger kids is like, think about the city that you're into. Yeah.
And that's some really good advice. Just because one thing about my college, especially, it's Marist College. It's right in the Hudson Valley of New
Red
York.
Foxes, right?
Red Foxes, exactly. A lot of people talk about it, and it's a very real thing. It's called the Marist bubble.
Yeah.
Where it's like you get so committed to being in this environment that you totally forget that you're in a town that's an hour north of New York City, and that's has a very high poverty rate, high crime rate. Like you don't understand the town that you're in.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just look at it. It's like, oh, it's a scary town. Don't venture off campus too far, and it's you miss out on a lot just because there's other colleges in the area.
Yeah.
There's other programs in the area. There's There's a train station 2 miles from campus that'll take you to New York City for $15.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a lot of times that people didn't necessarily. And I'll be honest, I was a victim of this as well. I didn't utilize the town like you mentioned, like you just mentioned.
Yeah, and I would say I didn't utilize the town to its fullest extent either. I would say like I was definitely in a UT bubble. It's hard not to when you're a busy college student, and in your case, you were a pretty high level athlete. So I can understand that. I just think that, and that's why I give that advice, is because I don't think I did a good job doing that. Like I think those are two kind of examples, but Austin has such a vibrant community, whether it's nonprofits, whether it's tech, whether it's finance, whether it's even athletics. Yeah, sports. There's so many different things. It's a major hub now that it's a consideration for anybody. And there's plenty of schools, UW in the Pacific Northwest, Portland State, like there are schools those are like in the Pacific Northwest, but like there's schools all over the country in major hubs that we don't think about and we don't value because they maybe don't have the name recognition, but they're in these cities that are hubs where you can get your start. And that's how I used Austin was. There's so many things on my resume coming out of college that very few people that let's say went to Texas A&M, right, would have on the resume just because they didn't have access to it.
Right.
So something to think about was, and that's kind of how I've governed large portion of my career is like, where do I have maybe certain accesses that other people may not have?
Yeah. And I think, very, very good point. And, I'm glad you're able to reflect on that and sort of just understand, like, this is something that I'm going to try to allow others to take advantage of. Talking a little bit about just how your career has changed over the past few years. If I have your timeline right, spent time in Texas for however many years, whatever, almost 20 years. Moved to New York City after that. Talk about that move, what went in, and where were you at in your career at that point?
So backing up for a second, when I got to the University of Texas, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer.
Oh, right.
About a
right.
couple weeks into my college experience, somebody in this common room was talking about these investment teams, and they were making it seem like it was super prestigious and you wanted to be part of that. And without really any critical thought of my own, which you will soon see that gets me in a lot of trouble. I was like, uh, not like a lot of like, it gets
What
me
are we
in trouble.
talking trouble?
Like career wise. I'll explain in just a second.
Okay.
They were just like, join this investment team, like, or at least apply for this investment team. And I applied, and they recommended me for this thing called the Strategic Capital Group. So I was on the University Securities Investment Team, and then within that team, there's like an elite team of the Strategic Capital Group, which is these young kids who basically manage this fund of like 25 to 30 to maybe even $40,000. All the proceeds go to charity. We're not like they're a nonprofit.
Oh, okay.
They send kids to banking every year.
Yeah.
But it's basically all these investment teams at the University of Texas funnel into investment banking or consulting. So, and this is where where lack of critical thought kind of got me siloed. I get a call that I got into Strategic Capital Group. It's not even a position I wanted.
Oh.
And my mentor, who is awesome,
Yeah.
calls me, and he was just like, "Hey man, like you shouldn't get this other position that I know you want more. You should just be in the Strategic Capital Group." And I was just like, "Yeah, sure, whatever."
Yeah.
And that defined my college experience over four years, in some really good ways and in some really bad ways.
Yeah.
So I think with that, I was just like, "Oh, it's prestigious. It's going to look great on my resume. I'm going for it." And that kind of defined how I thought about my career coming out of college. It wasn't, "Hey, is this something I really want to do?" And this is what I mean when got me in trouble.
Yeah.
"Hey, is this something I really want to do? Is this something I want to commit my time to?" Maybe not, but it's prestigious. It looks good on a resume. I'm going for it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what got me to New York City was investment. I basically optimized for 4 years to get the best investment banking job I could get. And I did that, and I was able to, I think, outkick my coverage in a lot of ways at this small investment bank in the city. And I moved there, started there, loved a lot of it, actually. I'll be honest. I think of the investment banking universe, the place I ended up was super smart people, like gave you a ton of responsibility for such a young age. I can speak highly enough of the investment bank, but it just wasn't for me. It wasn't a career path that was for me. And that kind of ended my time in New York City, what I would consider probably short. And because of how investment banking wasn't a good fit for me, I thought the city wasn't a good fit for me in a lot of ways. Not to mention I had mice in my apartment. That was a huge one.
You had mice in
your
apartment?
That was a huge drawback for me.
Yeah. That's gonna always be a big no for me.
Yeah, it's a huge no for me. But and this is kind of what I was getting at, is like, because I didn't do the critical thinking up front and I let someone else think for me, even though I trusted that person, I still, really am a good friends with that person.
Yeah.
I didn't do the critical thinking of my own and being like, what do I want out of a career? What am I really passionate about? And I almost made that same mistake coming out of teaching, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Well, yeah. And I think you make a good point. You bring up like a good sort of another piece of, I guess, career advice that could be very beneficial to someone just coming up. It's like sometimes we make decisions to look good to other people.
Yeah.
Whether it's our parents, our friends, our peers, we all want to feel loved, and we all want to feel respected by others.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that love and respect is only going to come for one, the love and respect you show yourself.
Yeah.
And that comes through doing stuff that you actually enjoy.
Yeah.
So I think you did a really good job of identifying it at such a young age, because I know a lot of people spend years and years and years. And they talk about it. It happens on Wall Street all the time, where they spend years and years and years in a career like that. And then they get to, whatever it is, like 45, 50. And it's like, oh, yeah, like I didn't want to do this. I just did this because I was told to do this.
And that's exactly what I was doing, is I was going through it. And I think for me, my parents were never like, you have to be an investment banker. My brothers were never like, you should be an investment banker.
Right.
It was,
it looked good.
It looked good, and you're an athlete. It's competition that drove me. I wanted to have the best offer or at least like a great offer. I wanted to be considered smart by my peers. I wanted to be considered successful by my peers because I was so competitive. That to me, and I'm still competitive. I'm not going to get like, I'm still incredibly competitive, but
I know, dude. I know.
I apologize for that.
Should we hash this out and bring this up?
You can, yeah.
Because this was egregious to say the least. In our company basketball tournament last week, I had a wide open lane. No one in front of me.
A wide open lane.
Almost wide open lane. Let me be clear. Almost wide open lane. I go up, lay the ball in. As I'm falling to the ground, you're defenseless right after you make a layup, right?
Did you make the layup?
I made the layup.
I don't think you made the layup.
I'm pretty sure I made the layup.
You didn't make the layup. You got 2 shots.
Oh, you're right. I missed the layup. Never mind.
You did hit both. It was useless. You were automatic from free throws. So.
Yeah. It was quite the time when, and you said it coming in that you were going to be hard on me, that you were going to be physical with me.
I would have to be, yeah.
But I did not know how physical you were going to be.
Yeah. So all that's to say is yes, I am very competitive. Yes. I apologize for that.
No, you're good.
I got one of your teammates too, but he sold it. I forget his name.
Oh, Ben.
Ben, yeah. He's in the design department.
Yeah.
I got him pretty bad, but not as bad. Like not 5 feet across the court.
Yeah, he did kind of fall, like jumped in the air and then fell. It was kind of a lot.
But that was a ton of fun. But I've always been super competitive, and I think that colored my career in a bad way, but would later color my career in a positive way. Not hurting you in a basketball tournament. That's not a positive. But
no, and from what it sounds, you ended up more hurt than I was because I felt fine. I landed on my butt. I'll be honest. I was good.
Yeah, you didn't hurt me.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
I wouldn't get hurt until later that night.
Oh,
when I tried to do a similar thing. Actually, I didn't try to do a similar thing. I was trying to take a charge.
Really?
Yeah, I was actually trying to play smart basketball.
Yeah, exactly.
And he got me, and I fell directly on my shoulder, and that's how I hurt it. But yeah, back to the career thing. Like for me, competition colored my career, at least in the first part, in a pretty bad way. Where even when I was in investment banking, I wasn't focused on learning in any capacity. I was focused on seeming the best at my job. And even though I did have some pretty good moments, some moments I was definitely proud of, I don't think I was honest with myself about what I wanted to get out of the experience. I think if I had, and something I joke about a lot, but it's something I actually am pretty intentional about now is having a growth mindset. I didn't have a growth mindset. I was like, investment banking, I don't think I did.
You had a mindset that said, let me show you like how good I am?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And in fact, probably made me worse at my job.
Yeah.
Or maybe not worse, but like not to the potential of where I could have gone. And those negative times are something that color how I work now.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, sometimes I'll find myself slipping back into that comparing mindset or, something like that. It's hard to do in our teams because you're so helpful and awesome. To be honest, like the strategy analytics team is just awesome. So it's not like investment banking where you're incentivized to think like that.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get there, but I find myself more focused right now on like learning things and best way, process optimization or like process improvement and things like that. So I think that was a really big learning experience, was getting out of my competitive fixed mindset into still a competitive but growth mindset. Right. Like how can I learn to be the best at my job?
Yeah. And so did the career change help with that when you transitioned into teaching, or?
Oh, it was so instrumental in that, because you can't tell a kid, hey, have a growth mindset. Hey, you got to learn new things. Hey, you got to be willing to change. Hey, you got to be willing to do these things and not do it yourself.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So it's hard for me to be like, you really learn, you really teach by example in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And we can transition to Memphis now because There's no place I love more than Memphis, Tennessee.
Really?
Yeah, there's no place.
Really?
Yeah.
Even being in Cleveland somewhere, you don't like Cleveland like
I love Cleveland. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, look at my smile, man. It's like you should have seen me on the way to Memphis, dude. I went to Memphis in December.
Yeah.
I love that place. I love that place so much, man.
That's awesome. Because you don't hear that very often, especially.
Yeah. I think for me, it was kind of a place that I started to become it's going to sound dramatic, but it's true. I wasn't very happy with the way I left New York City, and for a lot of the reasons that we talked about.
Right.
Memphis is truly where I became like a professional.
Yes.
And started to become the person that I wanted to
be. I think we ended where you were talking about your experience with kids prior to working as a teacher.
Very little, very minimal. I mean, I had some experience debate coaching, and some experience coaching athletics, but nothing actually formal in any real way. Mm-hmm. And other than teaching or teaching assistant, nothing really prepares you for teaching.
Really?
In any sort of way. Like managing a classroom of 30 kids is really, really hard, no matter if you have like some slight experience in coaching or not. Mm-hmm. Teaching is just teaching. It's such a hard profession. Yeah. But just backing up a little bit, we've been talking about like decision points, right? Like critical decision points that, we both have probably made in our career. That one of those decision points happened at like midway through banking. I get to banking and now I have a decision. Something that you talked about earlier was how people end up in these careers forever, golden handcuffs. And really my decision point was in about January or February, midway through banking, I am getting ready for private equity interviews. I'm getting ready to move on to the next step, the natural next step. So everyone does 2 years of investment banking, or sometimes even a year and a half of investment banking, and then moves on to private equity or hedge funds or something else. Okay. So for me, I'm in the midst of that, right? And I'm prepping. I'm doing everything I did my junior and senior year of college, right? Without really thinking, without any critical thought. And I think for me, I get an email from Teach for America, and I'm like, oh, I never even considered teaching. Right. So I was like, I'll throw my application in. Maybe I'll get it. Maybe I won't. And I went through this whole process. And as I kept getting through the process and kept writing the essays and kept, learning more about the vision for Teach for America and teaching in general, it just kept appealing to me more and more. And I was like, my parents came to this country and used education as a means to achieve the American dream, or whether you believe in that or not the point, but achieve financial and what they would consider career success. And I realized I had never given anything back to the communities that had done that for me, right? Mm-hmm. Even though I valued those communities and it was really important to me, I'd never done anything in a formal way of giving back and serving in any way. So teaching for me, the initial genesis for me of teaching was serving my community in some way, right? And even though I'd never grown up in Memphis, serving my community was kind of more of an abstract idea. Yeah. So, but I had never had any like formal like education in teaching. I had never taken even like a child development class. Right. No, I was, and a lot of Teach for America teachers are like that. They had never worked with a kid before in their life.
But the biggest thing is the mindset.
100%. Yeah, it's a mindset. You can't look like my first couple of weeks of teaching were rough because I had a fixed mindset. I was like, I need to be perfect at this right now. As soon as I walk in, I have to be good at this. Yeah. And there are so many few jobs like that. I'm sure, when you were first interning with the Guardians, there's so many things that you started out, working with Raph and Austin and Penny, that you've improved on so much since your first couple of weeks, right? Yeah. And I think if you have that perfectionist mindset, right, where you come in and you're like, this has to be perfect day one, you're going to fail whether you have a growth mindset or you have a fixed mindset, fixed perfectionist mindset. Yes. It's how you deal with that failure that's different, right? So with the fixed mindset, I was like, oh my God, I failed. This is the worst thing ever. I'm the worst teacher ever. I'm the worst investment banking analyst ever. I've failed miserably. With the growth mindset, it's like, all right, I messed this up pretty badly. in these 3 ways.
What can I learn from this?
Exactly. What can I learn from that? And that was like my first big lesson in teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and geez, dude, like I can't imagine just like jumping right into that. And what exactly were you teaching? Like, what was it like going through that process?
Yeah.
Just, I'm curious now.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I get to Memphis probably like in June. We started doing like teaching assistant stuff. You get like some formal, like some online training and
Right.
things like that. That's pretty good. It's not a 4-year degree,
Yeah,
so
true.
you're still learning. And the places that
4 year plus, like my mom's a
yeah,
retired teacher. In order to be certified in New York State, you have to have a master's too.
yeah,
So not just the 4 years,
not
it's
just the 4 years.
5, 6, maybe 7 years of
Yeah.
formal just training and learning about the
Mhm.
profession and how to deal with certain kids.
Yeah. And in a place like Memphis, we talked about how your surroundings kind of influence how you act even as a kid.
Okay.
Memphis is no exception to that. And people will say, "Oh, well, underprivileged communities," they kind of, especially policymakers and things like that, talk about underprivileged communities or underserved communities as a monolith, or like that are homogenous and all facing the same thing. But it's not true, right? There are things in Memphis that are very unique to Memphis, unique challenges and unique culture and unique positives, right? And I think learning that was a huge barrier for me, right? Where it was like, I'm coming in from Texas, I'm coming in from just moving from the Upper East Side of Manhattan, one of the richest places on earth,
Right.
to Memphis, Tennessee, one of a struggling in a struggling area.
Yeah.
Um, all that's to say is I had to learn a lot. I had to learn very quickly and without a lot of training. So about midway through my first year of teaching, there's a teacher team. So I taught science and social studies, and I had a very experienced teacher, a very knowledgeable teacher teaching math. She had about 7 years of experience. And
Okay.
I had another teacher, she was teaching ELA, English Language Arts, who's teaching for about 10 years.
Oh.
Incredibly fantastic teachers, ton of experience, both quit midway through the year. So it was just me, about 7 to 8 weeks of experience dealing with about 60, or rather learning with 60 kids.
Learning.
Yeah, we'll call it that were just post COVID, coming back into the classroom, readjusting into the classroom after being at home in differing home situations for about a year.
Yeah.
Without any break. And now they're around kids their age and things like that. So it was a really, really challenging time. It really took a burden on my mental health because I just didn't take great care of myself because I felt so drained at the end of the day running around putting out fires.
Big time.
But I would not have traded that time for any time in my career. It was the most challenging time, but it forced me to become a good teacher.
Yeah.
It forced me to break through some of those barriers. It forced me to really apply the growth mindset with fidelity and be like, I just need to get better every single day, just like the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of new teachers, they have like a savior mentality where it's like, oh, I need to save these kids and they look different and act different, so I have to save them by conforming them. I was like, no. That it broke that mindset so quickly in me because you have to be like, we are all in the same, or we are all struggling.
Yeah.
And we all have different struggles. We just need to get a little bit better every single day.
Yes.
There are certain things that are out of my control in a situation. I just need for the 60 minutes that I have this student, I need to make them feel safe. I need to make them feel loved, and I need to make sure that they're learning. And sometimes love doesn't always mean a pat on the back and a good job. Sometimes love is out in the hallway being like, hey man, you don't get this together. I'm going to have to call home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So learning those things, learning every kid's quirk, learning to differentiate based off student, and breaking that fixed mindset, that savior mindset that I need to be, something that I'm not in the classroom. That was only born out of a challenge where two of the teachers were left. So I had to be better every single day. Otherwise, our elementary school was going to not be performing well. So yeah.
And I think that by doing that, you sort of mitigate like a lot of frustrations too.
Yeah.
Because if you're just up there like, here, I have to help all these kids, push them along. Like, here I am up here, I'm pulling them.
Yeah.
And if you put yourself in the same boat as them, and now you're just like, here, now I'm with them, and now I'm pushing them with me.
Yeah.
It's a totally just different, like, just structure of how things go.
Yeah.
And is what I can assume from that experience.
And I do want to say, like, I had a ton of really good administrators, both at the district and elementary level too.
Yeah.
So not only was I trying to provide leadership in the classroom, I was receiving good leadership. You know, shout out Mr. Henry, Miss Key, Miss Williams. Like, they were amazing administrators and really conscientious administrators that understood the community.
Yeah.
And really just cared a lot.
That's awesome.
So, you know, it was a really, really tough time, but I felt supported. And I think it just changed my mindset, right? Like, some taught me to laugh in stressful situations and like just be a little bit more accommodating in some ways rather than rigid.
Yep.
So I think it forced flexibility in me that wasn't there before, but also forced me to just be like, hey, we just got to get better every day. I'm here with you guys. I'm not trying to be something I'm not. I'm not a surrogate parent. I can't control those things. I can help where I can, and there's certain things I just can't control.
Yeah.
And accepting those things and rolling with those things was a huge maturing point for me. And it's something I still think about today, where it's like, even buying a house, right?
Yeah.
Super stressful, but there's certain things I just can't control in that process, right? Even though as much as I want to control every single little thing, there's certain things I just can't. And I'm starting to accept that more and rely on my training as a teacher to be like, okay, there's certain things I can't control. We roll with it. We add a little flexibility to our lives.
Make adjustments.
We make exactly. That's a big one. Make adjustments and keep it pushing.
Yeah. That's a really good mindset, and I think the Teach for America program, and I've heard such good things about it. I've heard people that I went to school with who have done it in New York City, and it just sounds like an amazing program. And I know, like, before we get into your favorite sports team that you fell in love with while you were in Memphis, to wrap it up, talk a little bit about just how you made that transition from teaching to moving to Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Now you work for the Guardians.
Yeah.
You know, in strategy and analytics.
Yeah.
You know, more on the vending side of things, right?
Yeah, concessions
Side of things, and how that transition came about and what your mindset is now that you're going into your second full season.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that. So coming out of teaching, there was a chance for me that I was going to be a teacher forever. I loved it so much, especially my second year of teaching, where we had a really, really strong team. Mm-hmm. And that's where I felt like I hit my stride for a teacher. I don't want to brag, but my kids had like the highest, and it really was a testament to their hard work because they busted their butt when they were in my class.
Yeah.
We had the highest science scores for like 4 or 5 quarters straight since 6 quarters straight, actually. 6 quarters straight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I was super proud of them. And I really thought like there was, I had discussions about maybe coaching other teachers, and I was leading the science program at our school as a second year teacher, and it was awesome. I think I started taking coding classes just on the side because I maybe wanted to do something with education data. And I always had a passion for sports. So I thought, I'm young and teaching can be there later on in my career. So why not just try for some sports teams? So I started applying to sports jobs, and one application process snuck their way in there. I actually applied to a private equity firm in Memphis too. So remember we were talking about like just not thinking and doing what's most prestigious or what has the most money. That kind of crept back into my mindset. And I applied and got the job. And it was a job that paid a lot of money in Memphis. Yeah. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do was turn down that job.
Yeah. I can
imagine. Either remain a teacher or work in sports. So that was like a big bet on myself moment. Was big like, either way here, I've given up a lot of money to either be a teacher or work in sports.
Right.
So I bet on myself. It's probably one of the few times I actually felt like I bet on myself.
Yeah.
Because in banking, I didn't bet on myself in any way. It was like a pipeline.
Yeah.
Hundreds of kids were going into it.
Mm-hmm.
So bet on myself, applied to the Guardians job. Throughout the process, I've never really experienced, even TFA, I'll say this, I've never really experienced a process as streamlined and as I'm not going to waste your time as much as a Cleveland Guardians were.
Really?
And I really respected that about the process, and I found the job really interesting. And I had taken coding classes to use for education data potentially, but I started using that coding classes for sports, right? So bet on myself, wanted a sports job, did the coding classes, then started applying to these jobs. Guardians, super quick process, super concise. Shout out Colleen and Kyle. They ran a great process.
They do.
And, really like the team and the strategy and analytics. Love meeting with Fish, Christy, all the people that we know. And they did an amazing job making me feel welcome and took the job after that because I just wanted to work in sports for a little bit. And, we both know how hard these jobs are to come by.
Yeah, they are.
And once people get them, they don't really move that often.
Yeah.
So I kind of was just like, all right, this is my next 2 years. And I moved to Cleveland.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
That's sick.
No, my next 2 years, I meant like my last 2 years.
What are you
was
going to
teaching.
leave at some point?
No, that's not what I meant. I meant like the last 2 years. Everything was 2 years increments for me because 2 years banking, 2 years of teaching. So
we're running close to that 2 years.
No.
You've been here almost a year now. So
I'm buying a house here, man. Come on.
Fair enough. But yeah, I like how you just sort of broke down how you move from job to job and experience to experience, and then you could see the growth just in your journey just by how you explained picking between those three options you had, where it was going back to teaching, working in sports, or working at that private equity firm in Memphis. And I think that your decision to bet on yourself and work in sports is something that a lot of us in our organization can relate to, just because like you said, it's such a crazy thing. Like for me, I'll bring up my thing, for example, like just to move out of my parents' house for the first time less than a year ago, and just be like, hey guys, I know I have opportunities to stay here and be with you guys, but my number one priority in life is I want to work for a professional sports organization. And you can't do that where I grew up. There's no professional sports teams. So it's like moving to a new city, just starting all over. And you've done it, 3 times now?
Yeah, 3 times.
Yeah, it's an impressive task. And it's something that I've only had to do once. And I can only speak to that experience as something like that was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. So I can't imagine doing it 3 times in 3 different fields. So
and I'm guessing, and I'm not interviewing you, but I'm guessing you've learned a lot about yourself, about your strengths and weaknesses after moving out of your parents' place and moving to a new city like Cleveland. Am I right?
Big time. And especially in like the career that I'm in, because it's completely different from like we mentioned earlier, changing expectations. It's completely different from what I originally wanted to do. The internship I ended up getting was the 3rd internship I had applied for. The other 2 didn't want me. The other 2 departments didn't want me. So now that finally this department comes along, they shared information with my now boss and one of my, one of the best people I've ever met in my life, just like a huge mentor to me in every way possible. They introduced me to him, and we just hit it off from day one. And here I am just taking a job based on him, not even the career, because I had done nothing. I had no experience in it whatsoever. So it's like, it's that betting on yourself and like understanding like you're going to grow and you're going to develop skills as you move along.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I felt also. It's funny. We had similar experiences going to the Guardians because I had no idea. And it seems like there was kind of so no one had my role before. And I was the first person to step into this role, and there wasn't a template set forth of like, this is how you be successful at the job, or this is what we need you to do. It was kind of define your own path, define your role how you see fit,
Yeah.
and add value where you can. And I think one other piece of advice for like younger people is like, don't get caught up in the job description. Be really solid about who your managers are.
Yes.
Like right now, I feel like I
Huge.
answer to really, really smart people that care about my work, that care about me. And that's what's going to keep me in Cleveland past 2 years or whatever
Yeah.
we're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, I feel very supported and empowered at work.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you feel the same way. I know the people that work in your department, they're incredible people.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I would say is like, even in teaching, I felt like I had the agency to really define my own experience in a way that a lot of teachers don't have right now.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a mass exodus from the field. Is like, and maybe that was a little bit carefree from me, where I was like, if there's consequences, what are you gonna do? Fire me? So like that was kind of the thing in teaching. But I had an incredible administrators that allowed me the runway to really define how I wanted my teaching experience to go in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And an amazing coach in the TFA level. So I think for me, having like look for that agency, right? And I'm sure you have that agency too, to add ideas, to add what you think is right. And that I think people, and I didn't have that in banking. No one has that in banking,
right?
Because you're just executing.
It's a machine.
It's a machine, exactly, and you're executing. And I would say that to me was like the big change that made me. At a certain point, I wasn't relying on my intellect in banking. In teaching and in now where I work right now in the analytics space, I have to rely on my own intellect, and that's where I learn. And I mess up a lot. Trust me, I mess up a lot in both cases, but I learn a ton every single day. And I love that.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm gonna make sure my mom listens to this. She was a teacher for 30 plus years. She's now retired. Congratulations, Mom. Just so she like hearing the way you talk about the profession is something that I think is lacking in today's day and age, where so many people are just like dissing the profession and dissing the people who work in it, especially when that's arguably the most important job in America right now.
Teaching is such a hard job.
Yeah.
And anyone there are people that you can personally not like. There were other teachers I didn't agree with, or I didn't do that, or like maybe I didn't agree with their method, and I flat out maybe I just didn't like them. I'll just be honest.
Yeah.
But I will respect any single person who walks into a classroom and say, "Hey, this classroom is mine. We're going to do things my way because I think it's what's best for the kid."
Yeah.
And for me, when I see like things complaining about teachers or how a teacher might act, if it's egregious, I get it. But I see a lot of teachers bust their butt for their kids and they don't get thanked for it and they don't get the recognition that they deserve. And that to me breaks my heart. And so why a lot of people leave the profession. It used to be such a time honored, even when we were kids, it was such an honored profession. And it's still in maybe some communities it is. But this is why we see a lot of deterioration in education. It isn't because kids are any different than how we grew up, right? They're not genetically different. What they're made of is not different. It's the quality.
They have different resources, but
I would say they have more resources than when we were kids.
Right. No, I'm saying like just the structure of the resources is different.
Oh, but those inequities have been around forever. And they're widening inequities. Mm-hmm. But I mean, even what I'm saying is like the behavior of kids, even in affluent neighborhoods, which we used to, I think a lot of us have the mental model like, oh, those kids don't have problems. But post-COVID and post the teaching, like the massive teaching shortage we had, a lot of students that you would think aren't falling through the cracks, quote unquote, are falling through the cracks.
Right.
Because teachers aren't being respected, they aren't being paid enough, very candidly.
Huge.
And I think a lot of teachers are there because they love the work. And I love the work. I miss teaching every single day. That's why I do Tree to You.
Right.
I miss teaching every single day because there's nothing like it in the world where you feel so accomplished about something that isn't like, I love my job now, but building a Tableau doesn't feel as good as like a kid acing something that they didn't think they could ace, or a kid improving a little bit more, or a kid even relying on you for something that he may not, rely on everyone else for. I'll be candid. That to me was like a good feeling.
Yeah.
So, and building relationships with students. So I think that has been almost legislated out by like policymakers and some bad administrators that have gotten a lot of power in our education system. But there are still teachers doing really, really hard work for very little pay.
Yep.
And I really hope that changes, because that benefits every single person
Yeah.
in that school when a teacher gets paid more. So,
Yeah.
all this to say is I learned a lot from the profession. I love the kids. I love the Memphis. I love where I taught. I love everyone I worked with. And I would never trade that experience for the world. And when I retire, I will be a teacher again.
Awesome.
There's nothing better than being a teacher, man. There's really nothing better.
Yeah, and my mom's the same way. I think, she said she's retired when she literally now works a job as a advisor at Syracuse University.
It's so hard to get out of that environment of
Yeah.
like helping people and helping students. Like,
Yeah.
it's really hard to get out of that environment. And True to You gives me those flashes of things like that. And swim coaching, which I do now with like youth, gives me flashes of that. But it's like owning the work stream, right? In analytics or even in community impact, you own the work stream, it becomes yours, and that passion naturally rises from you.
Yeah.
Teaching, it's like that, but like 3 times that,
Yeah.
because you're serving a classroom of students that rely on you. There's no other option other than to care and give your 100% when you walk in the building. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, some teachers just don't care. Most of the teachers I've ever seen give 100% of what they have in the classroom.
Yeah.
Dude, I remember me and my teaching partner, she was, a really, really conscientious. We were teaching in 90-degree classrooms at certain points, right? Just because we couldn't get an air conditioning part in our classroom. Like that is all grit and heart. And like, I'm a young guy, so I could whatever. But like some of the teachers were older, and they were putting in the time in the classroom, getting 15,000 steps a day. Like, those are the teachers that you like look up to and respect, man. They are just, dudes, man. Teachers are something else, dude. Especially in Memphis. Especially Memphis teachers, man. Memphis teachers, they go through so much and so much upheaval and so much pain and stress and hard work and so many challenges that other teachers, I'm sure, face. But Memphis is a very, very hard community to teach in.
Yeah.
And I respect people who've done that for 15. I don't know. I don't know if I could, but I love it. All I know is I love my 2 years, every second of it.
Yeah. And, all I know about Memphis is what I've heard in hip hop. So my education on Memphis comes from Key Glock, Yo Gotti, and Young Dolph.
Yeah.
So just from what I've heard, it does not seem like an easy place to work in that profession and work in that field and to interact with those people. And I think you brought up a really, really good point in how like ownership, like owning the work stream, like we as humans, we take like a certain level of pride, like a huge level of pride in owning something.
Yeah.
Just like you're talking about buying a house, just like with everything. When we own something, we take a certain level of pride. We take a certain level of just care and patience.
Yeah.
And I think, just owning that whole process, I think, is what really, really helps drive that sort of sense of pride and sense of
And one other like concept I think that really helped in teaching was like compounding interest. Finance or something is a big part of finance, which is like, and it's like the counter to the state. So a lot of people from TFA come in with like a savior mentality, which is like, I need to save every kid, and if I don't, and it's like there's a lot of structural things along with that savior complex. And I'm not going to say I didn't have it when I first walked into the classroom. What broke me was the idea of compounding interest, right? Like, you're never going to change. You don't have the power to change a community on your own, or in one day, or in even 2 years, or that time. You can only play a small part in helping a group of kids get a little bit better every day. And that to me is what I take today in my mindset today, which is like, I can't upheave all this process or sorry, improve all this process overnight.
Yeah.
It's going to take getting a little bit better every single day. And those small increments of getting better is what's going to compound into like a better community or a better process, right? So
Agreed.
I encourage people to think like that.
Yeah.
And even I can get impatient with myself and get stressed and get annoying and high maintenance and type A and whatever, all that kind of stuff. But I try to center myself in the idea of compounding interest and getting just incrementally better every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good mindset. That's a really good approach to not only teaching but literally everything else that you try to grow into. So to wrap things up, let's talk just a bit about your thoughts on the 2020, because I know you have your own podcast.
Yeah. Hoops Royalty.
You can plug.
Oh, Hoops Royalty. Yeah. Shout out King. Miss you, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know when I originally thought about bringing you on and talking, I was like, oh, we're just going to talk about basketball the whole time.
Sorry.
No, exactly. But I think this conversation was better than any basketball conversation we should have, because then people get your full perspective on different things, and people who maybe going through transitions like you do, or working in neighborhoods like you did, and working with kids like you did. I think they would learn more from that than they would just hearing two guys talk about basketball today. So, just to briefly touch on it, what are your thoughts on the 2023-24 Memphis Grizzlies? I know John Morant was out for such a long period of time, comes back, shows flashes of greatness, had that game winner in his second game back.
First game back. Yeah.
And then now he's out for the season.
It's just a story of Memphis, man. Constant challenges, right? Constant challenges. No. So we started the podcast because King is a longtime Grizzlies fan. Okay. I'm a newer Grizzlies fan. I fell in love with Memphis so much. I fell in love with everything, including the Grizzlies. I love that city so much. It means the world to me. And, if my job was fully remote, I'd be back. No, I'm just kidding. But all that's to say is, this year has been really big struggle. But there's, like we talked about, there are silver linings and positives to be gleaned from everything.
Yeah.
Because guess who's getting a little bit better every day? Vince Williams Jr.
Yeah.
Guess who's getting a little bit better every day? David Roddy. Still not great. Still not great. Not great at all.
I like
actually.
Roddy. Yeah.
I like him. His net rating is horrible.
Yeah. Okay.
But you have guys that would never get like big league NBA minutes, getting NBA minutes, right? Like
Scottie Pippen Jr.
I was just talking about this. Vince Williams Jr. We're giving our young players that will have an opportunity to contribute down the line when we are all healthy, the ability to get some big time minutes, guarding guys that they're going to have to guard later on down the line, right?
Yeah.
Like Vince Williams Jr. versus Luka Doncic is very much a matchup that you might see in a playoff game in a couple of years. What, you don't think so?
Just go ahead. And I don't know if that's the narrative you want to run with when it comes to the 2023 the current state of the Memphis Grizzlies. But if you see that in Vince Williams Jr., like
you don't see him as a starter?
I don't really like.
Sorry, let's start here. Do you not see him as an elite defender?
I don't, dude. The thing about the Grizzlies is I'm not very tapped in with them, which is why I wanted to talk to you about them. So you can.
I think Vince Williams Jr. I think Vince Williams Jr. is going to be an elite perimeter defender in the league.
And then, so here's the thing about defense in the NBA. It's defense in the NBA is the factor that makes either a player stick or not stick in the NBA, in the league. If your offensive talent is what gets you to that level, though. So where is he at offensively?
3-and-D. He's a 3-and-D guy. I'm not saying he's going to star for our team. I'm saying he's going to guard the best player on our team.
Right.
Especially if Marcus Smart is out or taking minutes off. I'm not even saying he's going to be – I'm not saying he's a star. I'm saying he's a role player that can be serviceable, if not a really important piece of a championship team.
Okay.
Right? Like, am I calling him as good as Luka? No. I'm saying he can defend Luka for big minutes and has defended Luka for big minutes this year.
Yeah.
He's consistently guarding the best player on the team, and he's only going to get better.
Yeah.
And that's my point. Is like it's not about right now for the Grizzlies.
Yeah,
it's
true.
really not. It's about, can we get G.G. Jackson, who's 19 years old?
Yeah.
Can we get him serious minutes and teach him how to create for others on an NBA level?
Mm-hmm.
Can we get Vince Williams guarding these stars that he's going to have to guard later on in the line? Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude, if Luka drops 40 on him tomorrow or whenever, I don't really care. Mm-hmm. But if Vince Williams Jr. sits down after that game and takes the 45 minutes of film and be like, I got cooked every single time during this one play, and he learns from it, and he can take that into 2025, 2026, when we actually have the chance to make a championship run, mm-hmm. I'm all for that. I don't care if he gets cooked right now.
Okay.
That's my point. It's like, these guys are young, man.
Yeah.
Vince Williams Jr. is 22, 23. Gigi's 19.
Yeah.
Tall, athletic, fast. Jaren's still young. Dez is still young. They're out. They're going to be out for a little while. But if you get
still young,
if you get your youngest players, your second round draft picks, serious NBA time, and they can become role players. Yeah, I'm okay with. We don't have a choice. 13. I think we have like 13 people today versus the Celtics out or questionable.
That's crazy.
Not to mention people like Santi Aldama, who's 24. Like, these guys are really young. They're getting really good NBA experience. That's a silver lining for this year. Would I have loved to see Jaren, Dez make a playoff push? Absolutely. That was the expectation going into this year. It didn't work out that way. Silver lining is your young guys get to develop in a way that is so unique. And then next year, you can think of it like an off-season signing, right? You've signed three of the top free agents. Yeah. Right? You get Dez, Jaren back full strength. And Marcus Smart back too. Yeah. So, like, dude, the Grizz are uniquely positioned, right? Because if you think about development, sorry, go ahead.
Well, my next question was going to be, like, you just mentioned 4 of their top 5 players, and I guess the big gaping hole now is in the middle with the Steven Adams trade. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really, really great point. We need a big man.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude,
like, you just mentioned, like, a very, very high quality starting lineup, and I'm just like, wait, what's missing? Oh yeah, Steven Adams got traded last week.
Elite, potentially generational rebounder. Yeah, that is missing. I'm not going to say
screener. Best, like,
incredible.
Best little things big in the league.
Oh my god, so fundamentally sound.
Locker room guy.
That's a great. Your guess is as good as mine. That's why I don't work for the Grizzlies, man. That's why I commentate and sit on the sideline. Yeah. I mean, there will be some big men that we pursue in the offseason. I think we traded for Victor Oladipo, which he probably won't contribute that much.
If he comes back, he's had 2 or 3 really serious
quad tears, right? Yeah. Look, we need a big man. You're right. That will be the offseason priority. I don't think right now at big man we have anyone that's really gonna be as serviceable as Steven Adams. I hope we can find someone similar to him. But my focus is on rebounding. For that position, I would optimize for rebounding, not for scoring, not for pick and roll, just for rebounding. Yeah, because we struggle with rebounding, and that's a big differential right there. So I think if we optimize for that, we'll be fine. But all that's to say is, like, these little. If you think about development in terms of baseball, right? Like, you want to get your guys. A lot of the big thing about, like, what bad baseball teams do is, like, they get their young players at bats at a major league level, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. But the Grizzlies are such in a unique position where it's injuries that have killed them this year. Right. Where these guys are all going to come back. Yeah. And our young guys are going to be half-baked to fully baked because they have so much NBA experience, and they've played in big moments, and they've played at MSG, and they've played at the Staples Center or the Crypto Arena or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's experience that a lot of young 20-year-olds in the NBA aren't getting right now, other than, like, Victor Wembanyama and top draft picks. So it's good to see that. I think Gigi has a huge high ceiling. I think Vince Williams Jr. has a high ceiling as a role player, and I think they're getting invaluable experience right now that's going to help them in NBA championship push pretty soon here.
Great. Yeah. And some good points. Well, we're going to have to see. I'm a Sixers fan, so I can't really get behind
Well, I don't know why you're even worried about the Grizzlies, brother. I'd be worried about the Celtics right now.
I'm extremely
That was
worried.
my pick to win the championship. At the beginning of the year, is the Celtics. Yeah, that was my big pick. That was my royal decree. That's what we call it, like our stamp. Right. I'm stamping Celtics win the championship this year.
They kept all their key pieces, and then they got better at what they weren't good at.
Who do you think the X factor is
on the Celtics?
Yeah,
it's got to be Drew Holiday, because if you think about it, how important Marcus Smart was to that to their playoff runs the past few years. Like, I know Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are going to be who they are.
Yeah,
it's a matter of being able the pieces around them being able to make game-winning plays like Drew Holiday has in the past, and he's even won a championship.
Kristaps Porzingis.
He's a good one too.
The spacing is crazy, dude.
Yeah, the spacing
that they have now, that's crazy. Like, Jaylen Brown's athleticism is on full display now.
He's still a solid rim protector too.
Yeah,
which is an underrated.
It's very scary how good that team is. I think, my opinion, will be Nuggets, them in the final, Celtics win.
I hope not, man. Anything but the Celtics winning. If I had to equate Celtics fans to anyone, it'd be Yankees fans, it'd be Cowboys fans, it'd be the worst fans in the sport are Celtics fans. I'm not going to lie.
That's so funny that you didn't say Lakers fans. Okay.
No, Celtics fans are way worse than Lakers fans. So much worse. I'd equate them to the Duke basketball fans. They're the Yankee fans of what? They're the Yankee fans.
No, I agree. I hate Duke fans. No, exactly. I completely agree. Couldn't agree more. Cowboy, like, have you seen the meme, like, Cowboys, Lakers, Yankees fans that are just like,
exactly. Yeah. But yeah, man, I'm excited for the rest of the season. I hate to see the injuries that my team's currently dealing with, but I know the NBA is in a good spot regardless of whether or not my team makes it or not, and I'm excited to see what happens this year. And
I'll be watching.
Absolutely. We'll be watching, dude.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share? Anything else you'd like to promote?
No, nothing to promote. Go to Guardians games. Listen to Hoops Royalty. That's it.
Yeah. And, I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you guys dealing with the technological difficulties that we've run into on this podcast. But it's been a great episode, and thank you.
Yeah, of course, man. Yeah.
The problem with us is we need to use our heads, not our emotions. Sometimes we become too emotional with things where we need to be more logical with things. Now, as the Lord Jesus said, what does it benefit a man if he gains the whole world and then loses himself at the end? I cannot be selfish. Why? Because what have I gained by being selfish? I just want to be successful for me, rich for myself. I need to make it to the shores of peace on my own. What am I going to benefit if I enter paradise alone, paradise without people with me? I don't think it's a really happy place to be.
It's not in Scripture. If we go look at Scripture, which we'll do right now. Dear friends, you always follow my instructions when I was with you, and now that I am away, it is more important. Work hard to show the results of your salvation, obeying God with deep reverence and fear, for God is working in you and giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases Him. Okay, so there's a pretty clear instruction for us to show the result of our salvation and obey God, right? Why? Because God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases Him. So that's a pretty clear